Okay, well, let's get this show on the road. So, first of all, thank you everybody so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. I'm Meredith, I'm Keelabs Senior Marketing Manager, but before we jump into the session, I just want to start this session today by acknowledging that here in Vancouver, we are on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and give thanks for their generosity and hospitality on these lands and waters. And thank you again so much for taking the time to be here today. We also have Kim, our partnerships coordinator, helping us out today. You might see her in the chat box or answering some of your technical questions, so feel free to say hello to Kim. If you are new to Keela, welcome. Keela is a complete nonprofit management software that helps you manage your donors, market your nonprofit, and most importantly, raise more money for your cause. And just before I introduce our expert speaker for today's session, I have just a couple housekeeping items to go over. So today's session is 60 minutes in length, including a 10 to 15 minute Q&A session at the end. Please don't forget that you have access to closed captioning at any time if you need it by clicking the buttons at the bottom of the screen. And throughout the presentation, feel free to write any questions you have in the chat box or in the Q&A, and we will be sure to get to as many of them as we can. Speaking of the chat box, please remember to just select everyone when you type so that all of our guests today can read your comments and questions. This webinar is being recorded and you will receive access to the recording and slide deck by the end of the week. So with all of that out of the way, I am really excited and pleased to welcome Mer Joyce, who is the founder and principal of Do Big Good, a Seattle-based firm that trains and facilitates inclusive decisions. Mer has committed her life to social change innovation and has collaborated with nonprofits, foundations, think tanks, and firms in North America, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East. And that includes Bergman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard, the Open Government Partnership, Microsoft, and Google. And Mer is here today to guide us through how to implement inclusive decision-making. She'll provide guidance about how to co-design inclusive decisions and navigate their challenges in a safe and welcoming environment. So with all of that out of the way, I will pass it off to you, Mer.
Thank you so much. And thank you again for making all this possible and handling the back end of this workshop. So yes, welcome. Thanks for coming to Designing Inclusive Decisions. I love that there was already a land acknowledgement. And I also love that because I'm based in Seattle, we actually have some similar nations that are represented. So the nations that we have down here in Seattle are the Suquamish, Duwamish, Stillaguamish, and also the Coast Salish nations that were forcibly removed from the land that is now Seattle and also still live here. And down in Seattle, we have a program called Real Rent that the Duwamish tribe runs. And so we do pay rent as an organization monthly. When I run workshops, I'll also ask people to put in the chat the name of the Indigenous people that live where you live. And so if you would like to do that, I invite you to do that. I'm not going to be looking at chat, but Mer and Kim will be helping me with that. So thanks. This is great. Two land acknowledgement feels like a step in the right direction. So this is what we're going to be doing today. We're going to start off with just a little bit of inclusive decision-making definition. There was a previous session I did on this topic. So that will be the similar content if you're at the last session. Then we're going to do an opening breakout where you just talk with a small group and start talking about challenges that you're having in inclusive decision-making. Then I'm going to go through a very basic process for doing inclusive decision-making, and then go through an example from Do Big Good we've used to co-design health policy with young people in Washington State. And we'll do Q&A during that process because after that, we're going to do brainstorm, the second breakout session, actually trying to apply that process to a challenge that you're having. Or a process that you're trying to run. And then we can do a Q&A at the end as well, if that's required. So I guess I will leave it to Mer and Kim if there are any questions about the agenda.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, feel free to pop any questions you have, and we will get to them towards the end.
Cool. All right. So here's some just community agreements. To have one mic if there's a conversation happening, give people space to voice their ideas, take space and make space, speak up if you tend to be quiet, if you tend to speak up, make space for others. I think in a workshop like this, it's probably not necessary to say, but approach new ideas with curiosity and be gentle with ourselves as well. Try to learn together. And just a couple slides on Do Big Good. So we facilitate inclusive decisions by using participatory design, and we're a 4-person team. 2 of us are based in Seattle, and then one of us based in Cape Town, and one of us is based in Orlando. So basically co-design firm focusing on social justice and inclusive decision-making. Some of our clients, foundations and universities and businesses, government agencies, as Meredith was so kind to mention. So let's get into the content. What is an inclusive decision? So this is our definition of an inclusive decision. An agreement about future action in which those affected by the action define the action. So I'll give a little bit of space here. If anyone would change or amend that definition at all, or if it was different than what you'd expect. And you can just share that in the chat. And if anything comes through, Meredith will read it. Okay, I'm not seeing
anything coming through just
yet. Okay, all right. So far, so good.
Hi, we're still warming up,
Still warming up. Okay, so far, so good then. So basically, when we're designing an inclusive decision-making process, one way to think about it is as a Venn diagram between who's affected by the decision and who's making the decision, and you want to maximize that overlap, right? And also being attentive, of course, to marginalization and power dynamics when considering who is affected. So some people who are affected, it might be easier for them to join the process than others due to awareness or technology or historic inequities of various kinds. So this is just following up the verbal definition. This is a visual definition. I'll move on. So now we're going to do an opening reflection. So it's going to be 15 minutes, and Meredith or Kim are going to put some breakout room links in the chat. They are it's a little fussy, jitsy. It works, but it's not perfect. But I think it's helpful to be able to do small group work so we can talk through what we're doing together. And basically when you get into the groups, you will just introduce yourself. The goal is to have about 4 to 6 people per group. Name, pronouns, organizations, something you're looking forward to doing in the fall, just kind of a more icebreaker. And then to have a 10-minute discussion about challenges that you're having in making decisions, or inclusive decisions that you're thinking about making, you haven't started yet, just to get into the topic. So I will start a timer. Because this is not built into Zoom, there won't be an automatic reminder. So you have to kind of be alert to the time. But are the rooms in the chat, Meredith?
Yes, the rooms are in the chat now. So they are broken down by the first letter of your first name. So all of the links are there. So feel free to follow the link that suits you. And we will see you back here in about 15 minutes. Oh, Mayor's got her timer going. We'll come get you too if we're missing you. So if everybody wants to just head over there, we will talk to you soon. Wendy, yeah, if you're the only one in your room, feel free to hop into one of the other ones. That's totally fine. Just popped into a couple of the rooms and it looks like there's some good conversation already starting in there. So that's great.
Okay, about 3 minutes left. Start finishing up your conversations. Okay, about a minute left if you want to start coming back. Okay, so that's time. So I'm going to start talking and invite you to come back into the Zoom. You will be using the Jitsi again, but we can repost the links so you can close the tab if you want. So I actually would like to hear a little bit about the kinds of inclusive decisions people are trying to make. For example, decisions that involve internal stakeholders within an organization, the process is going to look different than with external stakeholders outside of an organization. So Meredith, if you feel like that's something for chat that you can convey back to me, maybe let's do chat now. If you would, I'd appreciate it. Yeah, people want to share in chat, and then Meredith will just read aloud the different kinds of decisions that you're working on, and then we'll go on to the process and example.
Yeah, we have one comment about somebody who learned so much about first name letter distributions with the amount of people in the A to E group and then nobody in the final group there.
Right.
Yeah, we have Darlene here say that most people in her group were dealing with internal decision making and some challenges around that. Melia says we're trying to implement project management processes, and part of that is creating a decision-making process for internal.
Okay. All right. Yeah, the example is external, but through Q&A, hopefully I can fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Any other comments before I move forward?
One more here. So involving clients in the decision-making, oh, sorry, keep losing it here. Involving clients in the decision-making process on settlement services is a challenge. We organized some meetings, but people didn't really attend.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's a classic. Okay, so let's jump in and we can fill in the blanks with the Q&A. So also, if you see me diverting my eyes, it's because there's a dog sitting right here that doesn't understand why I'm talking to a computer screen. Okay. All right, so this is a very basic process. And you can, I'm sure, tell as I go through them that each one could be broken up into multiple steps, but I wanted something that would stick in the head. So it has this acronym of PSEPS, problem, stakeholders, experiences, pain points, solution. And so I'll just explain briefly what each step is, and then I'll go through an example. And I guess I'll pause for questions after this. And then also as I do the example. So our method for doing inclusive decision-making is informed by co-design, which is basically a set of creative methods for solving problems by sharing knowledge and power. And so that's why we start with this idea of problem definition, which is a big design. It's a classic of a design process, is you start with the problem. So it's, why do we need to make this decision together? What information do we not have, or what do we need to do that we need to make a decision together? And you can do that problem definition basically with as many people as you have representation with at the beginning, because the problem will be refined in the process, for example, by defining pain points. So define the problem, anyone that you're kind of basically one step away from, that you can call and be like, hey, we're doing this problem statement, emailing it, or hey, can you jump in a meeting? That's sufficient. I don't think you need to go beyond that just to define the problem, because after you define the problem, you're going to define stakeholders. So this is who is affected by the problem. If we think of inclusive decision-making being the people affected by the problem are making the decision, stakeholders is the people affected by the problem. And as you can see, there's 2 steps in stakeholders. So that's first identification and second engagement. So engagement is encouraging people to actually join the process. And if the people who you want to join the process aren't, that's okay. Often there's some kind of trust building, or is this really worth my time? And I would say you start with whoever's ready and interested, and you keep the door open. And as you generate outcomes, and make change, then people who maybe didn't join in the beginning will say, oh, this is a process that's actually doing something, and this is worth my time, and then they'll join. Then after you have your stakeholders engaged in a process, coming to meetings, you want to ground the process in their lived experience. So the lived experience of the people affected by the problem. And there's tools like journey maps that you can use to visualize people's lived experience to kind of create artifacts. But that's quite important. And that also validates anyone to be at the center of a decision-making process. You don't need to be an expert. You just need to be an expert on your own experience, lived experience, and everyone has that expertise. So from lived experiences, you will identify pain points, which are recurring problems that you're seeing coming up again and again in personal stories. It could also be that one person has a pain point that's so egregious that you decide you want to focus on it as a group, even though it's not recurring, but generally pain point means a recurring problem. And also what will come up at this point is opportunities. So not just pain points will come up, but opportunities or possible solutions will also start emerging during the experiences phase. But I decided in this process to put solutions as the final stage. And there's dogs barking. There's 2 parts of the solutions phase. There's brainstorming, which is saying, hey, we have these pain points. Let's think as a group how we can generate lots of different ideas about how to fix these problems. And brainstorming, it's a yes and environment. It's there's no wrong answers environment. It's, hey, let's come up with the craziest ideas we can. Maybe we shouldn't be using the word crazy. The wildest ideas we can. And that's brainstorming. And then there's prioritization, which is saying, hey, we came up with all these ideas. Let's do something like dot voting, which I'll show you an example of that, to actually say, hey, what is most feasible, or what do we most want to implement? So that's the basic process. I will go through an example, but yeah, Meredith, I'll take some questions now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had a question come in from Allison, and Allison says, what about when a problem needs to be co-defined, or put differently, how do you know who to include in the problem definition?
So yeah, I would say you can step forward a little bit and think about the stakeholders. So think based on whatever your first impulse about what the problem is, think about who is affected by that problem, and then you can draw them in to help you define the problem.
Okay, amazing. And then we had just one more. How do you manage decision-making between frontline staff and management or board members who have different focuses and perspectives?
So they're solving the same problem though?
Yeah.
So when you say how, if in this context, I'm probably going to give a single sentence answer. So how sounds like it could be what maybe like to refine that question or narrow that question.
Yeah, I think it's just when you have, you have management, you have board, everybody, we're solving the same problems, but everybody might have different opinions on how you should get to that end result. How do you manage all of those different opinions along the way to make sure that people like your board and your management feel heard, but kind of guiding them in the way that maybe you would like them to go?
Yes. So I guess we have kind of workshops where you have people surface their proposals or surface their analysis of the pain points. And then you have a prioritization system where kind of everyone is given access to present their problems. Everyone's given access to propose solutions. Everyone's given access to a voting system to prioritize. And you can do that serially. So you could say, here are some pain points we've collected in the previous meeting, what's missing, right? Or you could say, here's how the past group voted. Is there anything that you want to, that you think like didn't get the attention it needs? So you can do things at separate meetings, but you basically want, I would say inclusive decision-making, thinking about power, giving everyone equitable access to the different parts of the process by bringing information from one session to the next as facilitator.
Amazing. And then one more just came in that's kind of along the same line, but what is an ideal number of stakeholders to include? Too many chiefs can be ineffective.
Yeah, so I actually don't think there's a maximum number. It's just you need to change the process, right? So if I'd say basically the bigger the group, the more you need to think about doing things asynchronously, having multiple meetings, working in small groups, thinking about how can we have 100 people vote on something? Might we need to use balloting? Might we need to use, like an online poll versus just having everyone vote with stickers in a single workshop? But I don't think there's an upper range. We try in the US to do some kind of inclusive decision-making that involves all citizens, right? When we do voting for our leaders. So I don't think there's an upper range. It's just the process is going to look different.
Amazing.
Maybe one more, and then I'll do the example.
Sure. So we actually had a comment. So I don't know if you wanted to comment on this, but we've had Darlene says that she has found good results using consent rather than consensus in the context of using a sociocracy governance system, delegating decisions down to the small group that is actually implementing the action.
Yeah, so there's multiple models, and sociocracy is another model of inclusive decision-making that is more structured than this. This one is kind of giving you 5 steps and then you kind of implement it as you wish. But yes, there's other models as well. I think I like the flexibility of co-design. There's so many ways to implement it, but yeah, if sociocracy is working for you, it's Googleable. There are resources on how to do it, and that's another great option. So I will move forward just so that we have enough time to do that small group reflection at the end. So this is an example. So we were tasked with the state health authority to co-design some policies around substance use treatment with young people in Washington state. And some of this text is going to be small. I think it'll be easier when you have access to slides, which I think should be possible after this. But basically the problem was that there was a decline in the number of young people being referred to receive treatment, even though there was data indicating that use was increasing and the need for care was increasing, but usage of state services was decreasing. So that was the problem statement, which was generated by the healthcare authority. And then when we were identifying the stakeholders, we wanted to work with the most impacted stakeholders, and we used 3 criteria to define who was most impacted by this problem of a disconnect between need and access. We said, who is suffering most from the poor functioning of the system? Who would benefit most from a well-functioning system? And then who has the fewest alternatives to the state system? And a lot of those answers, we ended up coming with issues related to income, who's needing to rely on the state, and in the US we call it Medicaid, for their health care. And then, inequities, structural inequities around race, around LGBTQ issues, people who are rural, who just have less access to state services. It's harder for them to get to them. So that's a model that we generated that you might find useful. Then we did use journey maps. Again, this is something that you can Google. There's a lot of different templates for journey maps, which is basically a timeline that you can have participants fill out. This might be a bit too much information for internal processes. It might be sufficient for people to just write on a Post-it. This was my experience, around this problem that we're having. They don't need to do a timeline story, but this is an example of how to collect those lived experiences. For pain points, we also did interviews, and then we did some synthesis. So we had some themes that arose from the different quotes, or in your situation, it might look more like the different Post-its. You're clustering different Post-its. You're saying, here's the recurring problems that we're seeing. And you can do this in a single meeting. So you can have people write on Post-its and then cluster them. And often I'll use a different color for the name of the cluster. And people can actually cluster things as a group activity. So you have people write on Post-its and they say, okay, now let's all look at these Post-its. And if it's the same idea, let's put them together and then label them. And that can be how you identify your pain points. And then for solutions, you can see that blue text is the problem that was identified. So it was staff and facilities are rude or expressing biases. And this was an obstacle to care. And then we had young people writing solutions, possible solutions. I think the one that has the most little dot votes was something about screening staff members before they enter the facility. So you can see those little red stickers, that's dot voting. So you can do that digitally on a whiteboard. You can do it in person. You can do it also on like a Google form. But I do find it useful to give each person 3 votes, so they can have multiple priorities, or if they think that any particular solution is really, really amazing, they can put 2 or 3 votes on one solution. And that's a way for an individual to push up something that they really think is important. So that is an example with some external stakeholders. And we're going to go, it looks like it's going to be about 10 minutes. To consider, I'll show you what the activity is. So the activity is, you've already talked a little bit about the problems that you're having. So it's basically identifying one of those problems you've already spoken about. So going back to the same room, and then basically spending some time just brainstorming ideas of what that individual could do to have their decision process work better. Yeah, we could, maybe this is also a question for Meredith. So we could take 15 minutes and go to the end of time, or we could take 10 minutes and then have a little bit of time at the end for more Q&A. How would you suggest that we spend this last part of the presentation?
Why don't we take 10 minutes? We did have really great questions come in from the last group, so then we have a bit of time to answer as many as we can.
Okay. Are there any questions that people have before they go into this activity?
So we did have a question from Darlene about the rooms. So the first room was just a little bit too big. So why don't we take, maybe let's have A to C join that first link, and then D and E join the last link, which was P to Z, which didn't have a ton of people. We'll split you guys up a little bit more. And as always, if you end up in a room that has too many people or not enough people, feel free to move around.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And with that, we'll send everybody off.
Yep. See you in 10 minutes, everyone.
Evelyn, I see your comment about the groups. It looks like Kim just posted the breakout rooms again. So you should be able to just click on your link there and go through. But let us know again if you have any challenges.
Okay, about 3 minutes left. I'm gonna start finishing your conversations. Okay, 1 minute left. Would you want to start coming back to the Zoom? Okay, so that's time. I'm gonna start talking, and I apologize if you heard the dog in the background. It's because I don't have access to my mute button. So sorry about that. He's so confused as to why I'm not going outside. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes for Q&A. So any questions that emerged during the conversation that you wanted to bring up. And if you do need to leave now, I'll just also forward to this. You can contact me at any time at mair@dobakegood.com. I would love your feedback at this bit.ly link, DBG feedback. So yes, Meredith will do 5 minutes of Q&A.
Yeah, for sure. So if anything came out of the conversation that you were just in, please feel free to put it in the chat. We do have a couple that came in before here. So we have one that says, how does one identify and manage power dynamics and acknowledge and make sure that there is no harm happening and that power sharing is enabled?
Yes. Is there a one sentence answer to that? Is there a scenario that you're thinking about? I guess in just an open-ended way, I think you just make transparent that this process is seeking to balance power dynamics and that we acknowledge that we are not coming into this process with equitable power, and to give people multiple avenues for expressing to you as facilitator observations about inequitable power dynamics such that you can fix them. So if it's a multi-day process, giving people a form inviting them to talk to you on the side, inviting people when you do community guidelines to, if it's virtual, to DM you or to talk to you during a break. So making it transparent that it's part of the process, and then giving people the opportunity to bring observations to you, and they will bring an observation to you that is specific to a particular power dynamic. And then you, as a facilitator, have responsibility for addressing it, for remedying it. The person who brings the power dynamic to you might have ideas about how to remedy it, but may just be noticing it. So that's an open-ended approach that I would take. Yeah.
Great. Okay, we had another one here. So many organizations are very grassroots and are moving out of being volunteer run to having more paid staff. How can staff manage inclusive decision-making for decisions that are in the best interest of the organization, but may not be popular with important volunteers?
Ooh, I think if you're transparent again about parameters, people will respond to that information. Sometimes people will ask, wait, why is that the case? Like, we need to do this in 6 months, or we only have $50,000 to do this, or, people might say, oh, why? But generally, decision-making within parameters can be easier. So I would just be transparent with the people you're making decisions with, if they're volunteers, and just say, this is the margin we have for open decision-making, and these are the parameters that we're operating within, and explaining why when necessary. But I think for most people, that should hopefully do the trick.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, I think we have one more here.
Yeah,
I think it's time for. So Joey is asking, I'm wondering how to balance reaching as many community members as we can, but wanting to take time to build trust, especially when our neighborhood is quite isolated.
So I guess I would go back to what I said earlier, is to do an invitation of the people that you feel are impacted and that you would like to include in the decision-making process. And then to be transparent of saying, hey, this is the first time that we're coming to you. What would the first engagement with us, what would you like to see? Maybe it's just an info session. And then again, giving multiple opportunities for people to join in, because word will spread probably of how the process is going. And so if you're doing a good job, which means listening and then responding to requests from community, then others may join. But I would just say, start with whoever's ready, take their input as to how they want the process to go, and then leave the door open for more people to join later on.
Awesome. Okay, it is 1:59, so we are right on time, and we will bring our webinar to an end. So that concludes today's session. Thank you again so much, Mair, for bringing such incredible insights today. We can tell by all the questions that came in that this is a really important topic. So thank you so much again for taking the time, and for everybody that took the time to participate today. Before we go, I just want to let everyone know that there will be a very short survey that will pop up right after this session. It should only take you about 20 seconds, but we would greatly appreciate hearing your feedback on the session. So I hope you will take just a moment to fill that out. And that's it. So thank you. Thank you again. We will let everybody go and enjoy the rest of your day. But again, thank you for participating.
Yeah, thank you. Hope to come back. I love talking about this topic. Thanks for coming, everyone. Bye.